In this video, I would like to show you how you can automate the content creation for your very own super newsletter using OpenAI's ChatGPT 4o and make.com. And this will enable you to reduce FOMO, so fear of missing out, because it will bundle all the information overload that we are getting according to your own preferences. And second of all, it will give you a tool to instantly produce and basically infinite amount of content for your very own newsletter that you can send out to people. And what's special about our approach is that we will integrate an approval function for that draft that ChatGPT has created by using the most widespread tool in the world, which is email. And the other thing is that it will adhere to your own preferences and writing style. And we are going to need 5 things for this. First of all, a dedicated email address where we will send the other newsletters to that will serve as our data source. Then a make.com account, obviously, then an OpenAI account so that we are able to use the API within make.com, then a Google account so that we are able to use Google Docs, and finally an account at something like MailerLite or MailChimp, so a newsletter tool, so that we are able to send the data into that campaign. And how this works is that we will create an empty Google Doc, which will serve as our data source container. We will gather all the other newsletters within that Google Doc, and we will let ChatGPT create a summary and the real content in HTML format out of this container. We will then send a preview of that to ourselves, including 2 buttons, approve and try again. And if you click on approve, it will then send this preview into a real campaign in our newsletter tool to make it ready to be scheduled for the next campaign. All right, let's get started. All right, guys, now let's get started. The first thing you will see is that I have been jumping into make.com. And obviously, as I've told you, you would need an account for this. So head over to make.com and create an account over there. Now, the first thing we will do is to create a new scenario. So you jump to the scenarios and then you would create a new one. I've already created a new folder just for this tutorial, newsletter automation demo. And we will jump into a scenario. Now, the very first thing we want to do is to create a Google Doc, right? Which will serve as our container for the raw data source. So what we will do is to go to Google, or to Google Docs rather, and we will create a new document, create a document. And you will need to have a Google account for this. So mine is already connected. So if you don't have that connection yet, haven't established yet, then just hit add, and then you will be able to sign in with Google, and then you will be able to access all your files and create a folder or files within your Google account within Google Docs. Now, the name of this file will just be, let's say, newsletter data source and its content will be empty, first of all, and the drive will just be my drive, and the folder we will choose would be the main directory. Yes, and as you can see, we will need to add a content, so just hit space. It's empty then, but we will fill it with all the necessary data. All right, hit OK. And this is already the first step. Now, the next thing we want to do would be to get all the emails, right? So the data source we are using will be other newsletters because that's the simplest. But of course, you could basically scrape other websites, and you could also use RSS feeds. But I personally find emails to be more suited because you have already subscribed to this, so you can already kind of pinpoint what kind of topics and what kind of creators you're interested in. The only thing that you would need to consider is that sometimes you have only like a snippet of the actual content, right? So within a newsletter article, there would not be the whole content of the whole articles, but just the snippet, and you would have to click in that email to the actual whole article. And that's the best thing in general, that you will be able to read the whole content. It would also increase the tokens that you would later need, and all, you know, the data per se. But this would be the best case in regards to quality. But at the end of the day, if you have like subscribe to 10 different newsletters, then you will get quite some content. So we're going to go with this approach. Now, the first thing after this will be to get the emails, right? And I have told you that it would be the best thing. So we will just type in email, then get emails. And the folder will be the inbox. And mark messages as read when fetched. No, we're not going to do that. Criteria, only unread emails, and I'll show you why. Couple of seconds. And all of the other things in regards to filtering is not necessary right now. You could of course look for specific email addresses that you have subscribed to and everything else, but we will keep it like this and hit OK. And I will go to the email inbox I was talking about, and here you can see that I have collected already quite some content and quite some newsletters over the last couple of weeks, and these are from different creators and different subscriptions. And some of them, as you can see, let's just click on this one, that's the German one. But if you take a look at this, these are all just like really short snippets, right? So to summarize something like this wouldn't be as wouldn't make much sense, right? So if you take a look at this, this is already more interesting, but still it's pretty short text-wise. But you will find some that have like whole paragraphs and the whole content, like this for instance. But you can decide that on your own, and obviously you would subscribe to something that you are interested in, or that would save or serve as a perfect base for the content you will create based on this, on these other newsletters, right? All right, so we are going to leave some of these as unread. So this is let's take just about 7 or 8 so that it doesn't get too much. So I will mark them as unread. And these are 1, 2, 3, 4, yes, 8 emails right now from different sources. And to set up a dedicated email address for this is the easiest thing for you to maintain, right? Because you wouldn't have to filter, and if there are like, I don't know, invoices or something, and that gets mixed up with some emails that have nothing to do with the newsletter, then it can get kind of dangerous, you know, because you would mix up your own data with this. So just create a new email address just for newsletter subscriptions. Now the next part would be to, let's just align these. The next part would be to insert a paragraph into that Google Doc. And we will therefore, if you remember, not remember, but if you know, the content of this module will be, or the output of this module will be bundles, right? A couple of bundles. So up to, how much did we say? Oh yeah, right. We need to set a maximum number of results. Let's just take 10 so that we will able to iterate over the whole inbox and then actually get up to 10 emails, and how much you are going to fetch is up to you. And then we will create another module for the Google Docs, but this time we are going to insert a paragraph into a document. So this is what we're going to do. We'll take the same connection, and The document we are going to get or we are going to insert the paragraph into will not be set by a drop down, so we don't have to select the always the same one, but we will get this dynamically. And if you hit on this field, then you will see, let me just collapse this, that you are able to choose what module or what output you want to receive from other modules, right? And if you hover over them, then there you have this little nice pulsing animation so that you know which modules this or which module this is referring to. So we will get the document ID from the document ID of that first document we just created. And if you run this multiple times, and we are going to order these, by the way, so we will schedule this like once a week, and everything that we have collected from other newsletters within that last week will be the basis or the data source that will be collected into a new Google Doc, right? Okay, then this will be the document ID, and we will append this to the body of our document, and the text will be coming from all of our emails, and we will choose not the header but the text content. So we won't choose the HTML content, we want the text doc content, because we want to throw that into ChatGPT later on so that it can read from that, and that's just less data, and that's okay. So far so good, and we could already basically try this out. All right, now let's run this and see what happens. I will go to run once, and later on, if we were to take this live, we are going to schedule this for like every week, and we will run this once and see what happens. And the Google Docs seem to have been created, which is nice. And now you can see that it's fetching all the data, and here you can see that it happened 8 times, right? So just exactly like the emails we selected in this part, right? Because we have 8 unread emails and we set a maximum of 10. So this seems to be correct. We'll take a look at what has happened, and we can basically already, if we choose Google Docs, check this out, and this is the file we have just created, right? So, and let's also see if there's already data in it. And here you can see that we have collected quite some content. Look at this. These are 50, 60 pages, and this is just from 8 emails, right? So this is a lot of content. Awesome. Great, so now that works. Something else I just noticed is if we were to name it like this, then we would always have the same name, and we want to have a different name, you know, for organizational reasons, that we are able to have everything nice and organized, to have the data in it, in the not the data, the date in the title of the document. So let's do this so that it's a little more dynamic. So let's call it not newsletter data source, but newsletter, and then we will enter a dynamic date. So we would go to date, go to format date first of all, and this will enable you to format a date the way you want, basically. So we will go with now, and then we will format this with, let's do it like this. So it will be year, month, and day. Yes, right. And then we will just add, I don't know, data source, for instance. Everything else will stay the same. Let's keep it like this. Run it again and see what happens. So this is our Google Doc. Still. Run it again. It got the emails and it's inserting email by email, paragraph by paragraph, up until 8 again. So these are the same as before. And if we switch back, then you can see that it has changed the name, right? So basically what this will do in the future is if we run this next week, then you will have the date of that day next week, right? So we will have a nice listed document archive with the date in the title. Now the next thing would be to get the content of that document and throw it into ChatGPT. Now let's see what happens. So the next module will be to get the content. Get content of a document, same connections, again by mapping, yes. And what do we want? We want the document of the, or the content of the document we just created. So, okay, this is working. Now, for the exciting part, we will use ChatGPT. Now, what we want from ChatGPT is to create a summary and the actual article that we will be able to publish, and we will need to create a completion. And we will need to create a chat completion, right? By the way, this will also need to be connected to your OpenAI account, as I've already mentioned in the beginning. And just as with any connection, you can add it here and then enter all your credentials, and it will be connected to your Make account. And you will be charged for this, by the way, because it's using the OpenAI API, the OpenAI API key, and you will be charged for this. So you can check this out. If we head over to OpenAI's backend, then this is where you will end up. And I'm already logged in, obviously, and you can just create your new secret key. Hit this, name it whatever you want. The project should have access to permissions, give it everything, and create a secret key. If I hit this, then you have your secret key. Copy this, and then you head over to make.com again and paste it in here. I have already established a connection, so this is not necessary for me, but this is the way you would go about this if you don't have one yet. And the model we're going to use is the new one, GPT-4o, which is supposed to be the best of the best up until now. And the messages is going to be the next thing. Now, I have already prepared something in that regard. And this is, first of all, we will add a new message. What role will this have? You usually start with a system prompt, right? So you will tell the system how it should behave, or the model how it should behave. And after this, you can have a back and forth conversation, or simulate this conversation basically between the user and the assistant, right? What we are going to do is just set the system prompt and a user prompt, and this will already be sufficient. Now, the system prompt will be this one that I've created before, and this is the part where it gets, you know, like personal in regards to your own writing style and in regards to your interests and also your target audience. So if we go through this, then you will see what I wrote. You're a newsletter editor. Your job is to curate and summarize other newsletters and so on for valuable content for your readers. Your target audience of those readers is mainly small to medium-sized businesses. They draw the most value of your content when you show them how they can utilize AI for their businesses by using insights, tools, knowledge mentioned in each article you write, give actionable ideas, and so on and so forth. Keep a friendly and casual but factual writing style. Now, you could expand this, right? You can get really precise with this. And what you could also do, you could add your own writings into this and then tell it to behave or to write in that style, right? You just need to give it a couple of samples and examples from yourself, and then it will copy this style. I'm just going to keep it as short as this because this is enough for this demo. Paste it in here as the message content, and this will be our first message. Now, the second message will be of the role of the user, and this will be, we'll be starting with this intro. You have just received this newsletter content specified on the topic of AI, right? And this is the part where we are using what we have already created with our Google Doc. And here we can again refer to the previous modules. So we would want to get the content of a document, which is the text content of the document from the document before, right? From the module before, from the one we have just created. All right. So the text content. And now the next part will be these three tasks. Curate its content and find topics that are worth writing about in regards to the value and so on. Off of its content, write 1 to 2 articles of about 2,500 characters length each. Remember, you're supposed to give actionable ideas in regards to how AI can be used in the reader's businesses, and then format your output as HTML like so. And this is actually quite important because we will reuse this content that ChatGPT is going to output as an HTML format in the next module, right? And so it's important that it adheres to this. And I've already prepared an HTML document, and this is how it looks. Now, if you're not familiar with HTML, it's basically a markup language, and you don't need to know this because you can just also let this be generated by ChatGPT on your own, right? So just tell it what you would want the newsletter article that the subscriber receives to look like. So if it should have a big heading in the top left corner and use a serif font and have a green background or whatever you would like, and then it will spit out this HTML template that you can then reuse later on. All right, now this is exactly what I have done, and I will throw it in here just like so. It gets formatted like this, a little ugly, but it will work. And then I have added an explanation to the placeholders, because as you can see, here are some placeholders for what ChatGPT will create out of those newsletters into our own newsletter in regards to the heading, in regards to an introduction, in regards to the paragraph, right? And these are brackets, double brackets that I have used as separators, which we will use to serve as placeholders. What has to be fixed is fixed in regards that it has to stay static, and we will tell ChatGPT this as well, is the footer, the last part, because this is a very convenient way for you later on to approve or disapprove the content that ChatGPT has created, that the AI has created as a draft, right? So there will be a draft of this. We take a look at this, and we will see it the way the final user will see it, the final subscriber will read it, right? And then we will add 2 buttons at the bottom of this preview, and then you can just approve it or try again. And we will later on take those buttons out of this, and this will be the final version of our newsletter. So you will have a live preview, if you will, of what it will look like, including the content itself. And it gives you a really easy and straightforward way to approve to what ChatGPT has created. And this will be the part with the footers. And here's an explanation of those placeholders. And I will add this as well. And then the final sentence, only output this HTML and nothing else. Your output will be redirected, or will be the direct input into an HTML parser. So it's important that you do not output anything else. All right. And I will add this sentence as well as the final part of our user prompt. All right, here we go. This should be enough. So we have 2 messages, 2 roles. The first one is the system, the second is the user, with the prompts we just went through. And the maximum tokens, let's make this a 2,500 thing maybe. And of course you can increase this, but you will be or need to aware of the costs of the pricing. Hit OK. And now we have created the content of our article, of our newsletter article. And the next thing will be to send this preview to ourselves, as I've just noted, and see what it looks like, and if we are actually satisfied with the result that the AI created. So we will send an email, and the connection is fine. Save message after sending, let's say yes, and yes. Now let me just change the connection, and the folder where the sent mail will be saved. And who will we be sending this to? This will be your own email address, or wherever you would want to receive that draft. Subject would be something like, or could be something like, newsletter draft needs approval. Something like an editor would get. The content type will be HTML, which is important so that we will see what it would finally look like. And the content will be the result of what ChatGPT has created, right? So you click on result and it will be pasted in here. Attachment none. Hit OK. And this should be it. And now align this and we can test this. All right. No, we can't just release it like this just yet, because there are 2 things that I forgot. Now, one thing is that if we would run it like this, run the scenario like this, we would, for each and a email that has been found, right, we would run through the whole flow. So you would create a new document based on each email. And this is not what we want. We want to integrate a paragraph for each email into one document and then send this one document to ChatGPT, right? So this is not what we want. And by the way, this would also mean that you would trigger ChatGPT each time this document has been created. So this is not at all what we wanted. Now, the first thing we want to do is to add an aggregator between these two Google Doc requests. And you'll find this under flow control and then array aggregator. And what this does is that it compiles all the emails we received into a single aggregation, if you will. And we will choose the text content as well, because obviously this is what we want. And if you hit click OK, then you will see that this gets a gray background, right? And this is exactly what we want in regards to that. We want to retrieve all the emails that it found and get them into this one doc and then go forward with the rest of the scenario. Now, this is one thing that we missed. The second thing is, now our idea is to include two buttons at the very bottom of this HTML preview that we will receive as an email, right? And we want to, or we need to temporarily store this whole HTML file that ChatGPT has created to be able to retrieve it afterwards again, if it has been approved by you or by me. And to identify this, because we are going to get a bunch of documents, obviously, if we run this every week. And this has to be exactly the same HTML template that ChatGPT just has created, right? But because obviously you will approve this exact version, so you can't run it through ChatGPT again, have it recreated by this again, because it will give you a different result. So what this means is that we need to store this exact HTML document that ChatGPT is creating out of this somewhere. And something that's ideal for this is the data storage, or the data store in make.com. And I'll just show you how to do that. And if you're wondering why we wouldn't use Google Docs for this as well, there are sometimes problems with the formatting when it comes to HTML. You can't rely 100% that if you paste something like this HTML doc into Google Doc, that it will be able to be retrieved exactly like you put it in, right? So this is a safer way. So we would basically save the raw code of the HTML file into a data store and then retrieve this afterwards. And we will get into this now. Now, you will head back to the sidebar here and then click data stores. And yes, definitely save those changes. And you can see that I've already created a storage before, and just pretend that you didn't see this and it's empty. So we will add a data store, and let's call this, what did I name it? Newsletter automation. No, newsletter temp storage 2. And then we need a data structure. And if you can imagine that these data structures, all these data stores that we are using here are basically like tables. So these are basically nothing else but tables. And this is how you can imagine it. And if you click on add, I'm not going to use the structure I've created before to show you guys. And we will name this, what did I name it before? I will just name it the exact same way and then add a 2. I think it was HTML newsletter draft. All right, now let's name it like this again, HTML NL draft 2. All right. And you would need to add a specification, and this is basically nothing else like the column or the header of a column, right? And that you can later on refer to when using a request, which we will do. So the first one, the first column we will use is a content ID, and this will be of the type text. You can choose from a different types, and this will be sufficient if we use a content ID, and we do not need a default value. Required and multi-line, this should make a difference, because the one we are creating will definitely be of that structure. So the second column we want to create would be the actual HTML content, and this will also be of the type text, and that's already it. So we're just creating those two specifications, and this is already it. Hit save. Now, data storage size in megabyte, this has to be something between 1 and 8, so we will just go with 1. Usually these are just text documents. Just go with 2 to be on the safe side, and hit save. And now we have our data storage where we can store the HTML doc. We will head back to the scenarios, go to our newsletter automation, and now we'll add another step at the very end. So after we have sent that email, we will create a data store and add a record. Now, the data store we want is the one we just created, right? Newsletter temp storage 2. And the key is that we will just use the document ID from the very first Google Doc, right? Because this is dynamic, and it will make sure that we will retrieve always the same document. Now, where was the document ID? This was this one. And we will use this as the content ID as well. Now, you might be wondering, why do we need a key and why do we need another content ID? And the reason for this is that we will need to integrate that content ID inside of our webhook link at the bottom of our HTML document, right, where we have the 2 buttons. And you will see what this looks like in a minute. Now, the document ID will be the same here, and the HTML content would obviously be, again, the result that ChatGPT just put out. All right, just hit OK. And now we should be good to go for this scenario. Okay, hit save, align this, and let's test this. All right, now let's hit run once and see what happens. No, stop. I would want to see forced up. I want to see, I'd already created this, but let's delete this. But accidentally it's already past midnight now, so we will have a different name because I wanted to distinguish it from this file, just for us to have a reference and know what happened. So I will just add a version 2 anyway, and let's hit run again and see what happens. So it already created the document, and you can see that it iterates over the emails again. Should be up to 8, up to 10, but 8 unread. Aggregated it, got the content. Now ChatGPT is doing its magic. And then comes the exciting part again. And we will see whether this has worked. Taking some time. All right, it's done. It did send the email, and it did store something. So let's check the data store first, save those changes. And here we can see that we already have a document. And let's hit browse. Now look at this. This is exactly what we wanted. This is exactly what we wanted. So this looks great, but now obviously for the exciting part would be this one. And here you can see for the first time, and I've tested this before as you can see, but this is now the preview of the document that ChatGPT created based on our specific input. This is fantastic. Now it looks simple, and it is, but as I've already mentioned, I personally prefer to have it as simple as possible, but obviously you could play around with this. And here we have our buttons. And to take care of them will be the next step. And let's just read it. Integrating Google Workspace AI for efficiency. Google's latest AI updates present practical tools for small to medium-sized to streamline operations. Here's how you can leverage these new features. Enhance document management. Use Gemini. Email efficiency. Task automation. AI powered for small business. And remember the prompt, right? I put in regards to having a benefit for SMEs, right? For small to medium-sized businesses. Fantastic. All right, now let's take care of those buttons, right? The buttons we have integrated in here, because now they don't do anything, right? If you remember the HTML that we have used, we just integrated or inserted these placeholder URLs that don't do anything yet. So what we are going to do is create a new scenario, and we will start this scenario with a webhook, and we will need the link of that webhook, put it in here, the real webhook URL, and this is where we are going to land if we hit that button. And webhooks, you can imagine, are literally like, you can imagine like literal hooks, like something a fishing rod, for instance, would hook into. And these are somewhere in the internet, and where is going to be defined by the URL. And we can use our fishing rod and hook into this and have our scenario triggered. Right, and this is what we're going to do. So the first thing would be to get the URL, first of all, and the second thing is, I'll get to the second thing later. Okay, let's start with the creation of the webhook, and we will go back because we have finished this scenario now. So we are going to create a new one, and we're going to start with a custom webhook. So this is what we are going to create. Create a webhook, and we will call this, what did I call them before? Oh, these are different things. Let's call it web, or not webhook, but newsletter approved. And we will insert this into the, obviously, the approved button. Okay, API restrictions for now, none. And we will need the advanced settings. And now comes the important part, because we will need to choose a data structure so that the webhook knows what to do with that data, right? Or what kind of data it retrieves and how it should go on by processing it. So if you remember, we have created this before with our HTML newsletter draft 2, right? And this is what we're going to do as well. And if you remember, this was the structure where we just had the content ID and the HTML content, and this is what it's going to retrieve, right? Exactly the structure. If we click on this, if we click on this link, and I will show you how this works in a second. So everything else can just stay the same. and we will hit save. Now you see how Make just created a custom URL, which is the address of that specific webhook. And we will copy this to the clipboard. And this is a fixed URL, or a static URL, sorry, a static URL that you can use. And we're going to hit OK. And this is the one we're going to paste into our request right here. Now, the try again button is something we are not going to do in this tutorial because it's basically the same process. So you can also get creative in regards to what you would want to do, right? But you want to just get a message that, or a message wouldn't be necessary in this case, but would you even want to use this and just write the content yourself? Or would you want to try it again, right? So would you want to hit ChatGPT again and then just have it go another round? And you can get creative with this, but we're going to stick with the approve button. Now, what this does after the question mark is, in general, a URL. If you have a question mark, it introduces it initiates a query. And these will always be in key value pairs. So this is basically data that you can send to this URL you're hitting. And you know this probably from APIs, right? It is basically the same system. And if you are familiar with different kind of requests, like GET requests and POST requests and everything in regards to APIs, then you know that there are different ways of how you can transfer data. And this is not the safest way, by the way, but it will be sufficient for our use case. And this is how we will identify which document we are going to retrieve again from our data store before, right? Because we're going to have a lot of documents at the end, and we will need to identify, okay, which document do you want by hitting that webhook, right? Which document do you want to approve? And this will be this one. So we will paste this whole block or this whole URL until the equal sign. Copy this and head back to our first, save this, to our user prompt in the first scenario. So let's get back. First letter automation and then integration. Taking a little longer. All right, now into our ChatGPT user prompt. So we go back down here. And if you remember, we have pasted this whole HTML template in here, right? So now what we want to do, and here you can see it's not beautifully formatted yet, but you can see where it starts. Here we have our link. This is where the URL starts, right? And we wanted to paste the block until, or the part of the URL until the equal sign. I'm going to paste it. I hope we can still see this. Yes, the content ID equal. And now what we're going to do is, if you remember, we used the document ID of that first Google Doc as the content ID, right? Also for the data store where we will store the HTML template. And this is exactly what we're going to do right here. So it stays dynamic, right? So we're going to insert the document ID here. All right, be careful that it's actually replacing this. There can't be any spaces. And this should work. I think there's no space. Yeah, this should work now. And this is the document ID. Yeah, this is the document ID because it's the same everywhere, right? And we already told ChatGPT at the end of this, if you remember, you must not remove or replace the webhook links I hard-coded in. They have to be kept in that HTML. So we will make sure that it will not be replaced, right? This part is between or inside the footer tag. Okay, hit OK again, and now we have our final button and button link especially. So hit save, and we're going to try this out in a minute. So yeah. All right, now let's head back to the webhook. Go to scenarios, integration webhooks. And we have already configured this, right? So let's now retrieve that document from the data store. So we will look for the data store again. We'll look for get a record. And then we will choose the data store from before. That's temp storage 2. And now you will see how it all makes sense that we have given it the same content ID as well as the same key, because this is the one we are able to use right now, because this has been sent through the webhook, right? With the question mark introduced parameter. And this will make sure that we are going to retrieve the exact document we want. Okay, so I think in advanced settings, no, this is fine. I'm gonna hit OK. Now, this will retrieve the whole document, right? Now, why would you even want to do this? Why not integrate this into our campaign tool, like MailerLite, for instance, directly? Because of those buttons, right? We need to get rid of them first of all. So how we will do this is by using a text parser. And if you're familiar with regular expressions, with regex, then you will already know what this is going to, or where this is going. And we will use a replace text parser, which is able to look for a specific pattern in our content, and then we will be able to replace it with something. And what we are going to replace it with is just an empty string, right? So we will look for a pattern, and this is the one we are looking for, right? So it starts with the footer, and then there's some content in it, and it goes down up until here. This is what we want to remove from the final template that we want to paste into the MailerLite document, so that it's just basically stripped off those buttons, but the rest of it must stay the same, because this is the version you approved. Now, how we're going to do this is that we will just look for the footer. The pattern would be just a footer. And then we will use a dot and a question mark and I think an asterisk. And this will basically tell it to, this is a non-greedy, so-called non-greedy match. And this will just catch everything that comes after this greater than sign, if you will. And then we will go back to the closing div tag, so it will catch anything that's in between, because you have to remember that this is going to be created dynamically, right? So we can't just paste the whole, can't just hard code it in. So we want to remove everything that's in there. And what we are going to remove it with is just a space. You could, of course, I mean, this would be maybe more professional, if you will, or more beautiful. Just use an empty HTML element like span, for instance, and then have nothing in there. But this should work. and anything else can just stay the same. And obviously the text we would want to look for within that is the HTML content, right? So this is the HTML content from our data store. Hit OK, and we will see if this works. All right, now we're almost done. The last step would be to paste this cleaned up template, HTML template, into our MailerLite, into our MailChimp maybe, or whatever tool you're using, our newsletter campaign tool. And we're going to use MailerLite, as I said, MailerLite. And there you have an option which is called create a campaign. And if you hit OK, then as always, you would need to create a connection or have a connection. Hit add, hit your API key, which you would get inside the settings of your specific newsletter tool provider. Just as always, I think basically you would be familiar with how to get an API key by now. And then you can give the campaign a name. So let's call it, I don't know, AI Super Newsletter. The subject, now we are going to hard code this. Obviously you can get also creative with this, right? So if you take a look at other newsletters, how they are doing this, some are doing this dynamically, some are doing this just by adding a number. So it would just be a number that adds up every time it's sent. Sometimes they're using dates, sometimes weeks, so that's up to you. But I think you will know how to create this dynamically. You could also, let ChatGPT create this as well, and then have it stored in here as a separate column. Now we're going to hard code this, as I said, and subject will be, I don't know, lose your AI newsletter, something like this. Now the from email in MailerLite, you will have to have this authenticated, which is a dedicated process, but which basically works like any authentication process you can think of. And mine is called Aziz, and then try script. This is the one, and this is important. Now the sender name, you can take your name. Now the content obviously would be now the stripped of that footer text, right? We have from that text parser before. Type of campaign would be regular. There are different types of campaign within MailerLite you can try out. You just use a regular one, and everything else is also not important right now. And this is it. Hit OK. And we are going to see whether this works. We have our text parser. By the way, I just noticed that this is the other way around. You would need to make it like this. Get all the content. All right, now we have this, and this will already be the final step to create a campaign. And now you can even, because you want it to be fully automated, right, as a final step, and this is to schedule that campaign. To schedule. All right, let's just look for MailerLite, and then they do have a schedule function. There it is. Schedule a campaign. And we are going to need a campaign ID so that it obviously knows which campaign to schedule. And if you click on the drop down here, then you see that it's empty, which makes sense because we don't have a campaign yet, right? And of course, you could create a campaign in your MailerLite dashboard, like hard coded in that in the actual MailerLite UI, and then select this here, but it wouldn't be dynamic. So obviously what we want to do is to activate this map toggle, and then if you head back into that input field, then you see that you are able to select the fields from all the modules like we did before. And what we want is this ID from the previous create a campaign module. Now the next thing will be, and by the way, you can see this little hint here, only draft campaigns can be scheduled. And the nice thing about this is that the previous model of create a campaign automatically puts this into draft. So we are able to retrieve this. Now the next thing it would be to actually schedule this. So you could send this instantly, but this is not what we want. We want to schedule the delivery so that you have a little bit of buffer time, maybe you want to update the content or whatever. And how we do this is that we need a date. And this date, let's say you are scheduling the first scenario we've set up of creating that Google Doc and everything that comes after that on a Monday. Then you would, for instance, want to send out that campaign or trigger that campaign and start this sending of that newsletter 4 days later. And you could then create a add days function. Make has all these different types of functions, like general functions, math functions, and whatever. And we are going to use the date functions. And what we want to do is to add days, and add days to what? To the current date. So the now, if you will. And the now is obviously, if you think we have scheduled the first scenario on a Monday, then the now is a Monday. And how many days would you want to add? 4, let's say, just for instance. And now you see this little hint down here must be a future date in format year, month, and day. And what now does, however, is that it will also give you the time. So this is not the correct format. So what we want to do is to wrap this whole thing into a format date function again and put this inside of here. And how is, or what does the format look like? Like the one that MailerLite needs, right? So you have the format of today's date plus 4 days, and then you have the format that MailerLite needs. All right, now we have this. The hours, you can decide on that how you want. Will be, let's say, at 8 a.m. Minutes will be 0. Time zone ID, we're going to leave this as is, and this is going to be resent. Now we don't need this, and that's already it. All right, and then click OK. All right, and now we should be good to go. Okay, I think I messed up the format. Let me just jump into here back again and start this from scratch. So this is going to be format date. Then you go into the first part, hit add days, and add days to now. How many? 4. And this will be the date, and the format, now it's correct, will be like this, because I think I forgot the last braces. The closing brace. Okay, now refresh, hit save, and let's see what happens when I head back to the MailerLite campaigns. dashboard, because you can see that this is empty now. And if I head back here and run this module only, what is going to happen? Yeah, we need some text, obviously. So let's just paste in some HTML, because this is what it will actually look like. Hit OK and see. Okay, this did run through. Refresh the page. And now you see that it created a campaign, and it really did take everything into account. The subject and the H1 we just put in, the test HTML we just pasted in, and this is fantastic. Now let's run this as well and see if this is also going to work. I think this was a hard-coded ID, and yeah, this is the ID. This is the ID we're going to use. So run this module only, and then for now we are going to paste this campaign ID in, run it. It did run through as well. And if we head back to our campaign, then you see it's gone out of the drafts, and we have something in Outbox. And now you see this is the one we've been using and will begin sending in 4 days. So it's exactly what we were trying to achieve. Fantastic. Awesome. All right, now let's test this whole flow. We, just as a reminder, in regards to our Google Docs, are coming from here. We have this version 2, and I'm going to head back to our main flow, which is this one. And I'm going to rename this just to have a little distinction again. I already renamed this version 3. All right. Another thing is, let's have a look at our data store, where we are with this. So we have one document inside of this, and this is the document we have retrieved before, right? And also we need to activate our webhook, otherwise it will not be available from that link in the email preview. And I think this should be it. Yeah, right. One thing is, let's choose different emails this time. So mark these as red, and let's choose 1, 2, 3, 4 maybe, so that it doesn't get too long. Let's choose 5. Mark these as unread, and now we should be good to go. So let's see what happens. Do we have everything? I believe so. Okay, hit run. So we created a document. Let's check this out. Yes, it did. It ran 5 times. All right, so it got those 5 unread mails. ChatGPT is running now, and we'll see if this works in regards to the new entry in the data store as well, right? So this worked okay. Now let's see if we have received an email. I see we do. Fantastic. And these are the buttons, right? So we have different content, right? This is talking about Google Workspace, GPT-4o, digital twins optimize manufacturing, other AI updates and news, upcoming news. All right, now let's see what happens if we hit approve. It did get accepted, which is a good thing. And now you can see in the URL, this is what we are sending, right? With the query, we have the content ID equal, and then we have the original document ID from the Google Docs. And let's see what happens if we go back. So this has run through, and we will head back to the other flow. If this works. And here we have an integration webhook. It's loading. And now you can see that there was a successful run of this. And this seems to have worked. And let's go to MailerLite, to our campaigns. If we have, you see, there's not even a draft because we scheduled it right away. And if we go to the outbox, I think we named it the same way. We should have named it differently, but still created a minute ago. And if we take a look at the preview, it still has the buttons. This is wrong. This is wrong. It did work in this regard, but it still has the button, so we need to take care of that. Alright, I now had to do quite some digging, but I did find out what the problem was. Now obviously this had to do something with the parser, right? With what we are doing here, because this is the exact spot where we are trying to replace the footer with something else. And if you're familiar with regex, regular expressions, these can get pretty complex and confusing sometimes. So you can, of course, ask ChatGPT to create a regex for you that would catch the phrase that you are looking for. And you can even test this by going to a site like regexer, for instance. And then you can paste your the regex you got from ChatGPT, for instance, and also the block that you are trying to catch, right? And then it will show you visually what of this piece of text is going to be matched. And as you can see now, this is working actually. However, the problem was in my case that if you remember, we had this document, right? And if I select everything, then you will see that there are a lot of spaces, you know, just to, from a human point of view, make it more readable, right? But the machine doesn't need this. So a solution, and also if you had like new lines and everything, and all of these white spaces, they can cause problems as new lines, spaces, and everything around that's not necessarily needed. So what you can do is to go to a site like this one, codebeautify.org, and then minify the HTML, which will basically, if you paste this original piece of text in here, then it will basically strip it of everything that's not needed to work. And then it will, as you can see, put it into one whole block. And then you can just copy to the clipboard and then enter it or paste it into the user prompt we've used in the ChatGPT module, right? So if we were going back, then this will look like this. I've already replaced this before, as you can, as you will see right now. And if you go into that module, the ChatGPT module, and into our message content of the user prompt, then you will now see that I have replaced this whole block with with the minified version, right? So there are no white spaces left whatsoever. You could even go further than that and tell ChatGPT that it's not supposed to insert or keep it minified. It will understand this. So anyway, this is what I have done, and this seemed to be the problem. Let's go back to our flow and restart it again and check if this works. And I've selected a couple of different emails again this time, and we will run this. And by the way, I've also cleaned up the campaigns because I've done some digging and they were getting kind of messed up. Deleted all the previous ones. Now we're back in the main flow. We have the data stored. We should now receive an email again for approval. This has worked. And now we do have the buttons in here right now. And if I click approve, it did get accepted. Head back to the flow and actually head back to MailerLite and see when I refresh the page if it's back in there again. And we do have one in the outbox again. I renamed this and let's see. And now this is a clean newsletter template. Awesome. This is exactly what we wanted, right? Fantastic. Fantastic. And this will be sent out in 4 days, basically, right? Awesome. This worked fantastic. All right, guys, congratulations. You made it this far again. I'm exhausted. It's 3 in the morning right now, but I believe what we got out of this is pretty cool, because imagine you can now create content on an infinite amount of data, and you can subscribe to more newsletters. You can tweak the ChatGPT prompts, right? And you could even expand this, like inserting images, for instance, that you let produced by DALL-E from OpenAI's API as well. And you can now set this up, and after that you will have an infinite amount of newsletter content, and you can do this by clicking literally just one button. So I mean, that is pretty awesome. And hope you like this video. Let me know what you think in the comments, and hope to see you next time, and thanks for watching.